From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, this is From the South, and I am Soini Gray. The International Court of Arbitration has ruled against Ecuador in its battle with Chevron over an environmental disaster. The tribunal unanimously ruled the $9.5 billion judgment against Chevron in 2011 was procured through fraud, bribery, and corruption. Chevron has spent years contesting allegations that it is responsible for environmental and social harm in the Ecuadorian Amazon. The company in question, Texaco Petroleum, was bought by Chevron in 2001. Chevron maintains the damage was done when TexPet was a minority partner in an Ecuadorian consortium.
The ICJ's verdict did not establish an amount that the Ecuadorian state must pay to Chevron. The appraisal stage for damages that must be paid to the company will start in 90 days and could last for months. Within those same 90 days, both the state of Ecuador and Chevron must present official letters outlining their claims in regards to the monetary sum. Today's verdict concludes that the Ecuadorian state is responsible for having violated Article 2 of the bilateral agreement for investment protection between Ecuador and the United States.
For its part, the Ecuadorian government has blamed former President Rafael Correa for this ruling. A spokesperson for President Lenin Moreno has said that Correa spent millions of dollars of public funds in his campaign to aid indigenous people in their trial against Chevron.
The previous government paid over $10 million in national and international media campaigns in support of this case. They made the people believe that international celebrities support that cause, when in reality they were being paid to show support using public funds.
Denise Herrera has more from Quito.
Hello, yes, an international court ruled in favor of the oil company Chevron and declared Ecuador responsible for violating a bilateral investment treaty on those years. This oil company Chevron and Texaco said that Ecuador allowed indigenous people to sue them for environmental damage. This decision was taken after these oil companies started a legal process against Ecuador in 2009. Under this, the current government declared and said in an official statement that if the former government interfered in this case, they will find a responsible. We should remember that former President Rafael Correa started a very strong campaign against these oil companies. So now Ecuador will have 90 days to resolve this situation, and also we'll know how much money it will have to pay. That is all we have for now. Back to you at the studio.
And Telesur English recently published a documentary short featuring those affected by the oil spill. You can watch the entire documentary on our website. Brazil's far-right candidate Jair Bolsonaro was stabbed on Thursday during a campaign rally in the state of Minas Gerais. A 40-year-old man has been arrested in connection with the attack. Bolsonaro was rushed to the hospital after suffering massive blood loss and injuries to his stomach. His doctors say he is stable but could take 2 months to recover fully. Last night, some of Bolsonaro's supporters held a vigil for him in Sao Paulo. The former military officer has built his campaign appealing to right-wing nationalism. He opposes abortion and gay rights and promises to fix the Brazilian system. Last week, he pretended to hold a gun and threatened to shoot members of Lula's Workers' Party. Other supporters gathered outside the hospital.
I was very worried because it seemed only like a blow to the stomach or being hit by a ball in football. The pain was unbearable, and then it seemed like something serious had happened.
He is already awake. He is breathing spontaneously, and we are now taking the necessary precautionary measures to prevent any infection or new bleeding. The usual post-operative care after a serious trauma like the one he suffered.
He is stronger than ever. He is conscious. He's talking, ready as always. To those who wanted to destroy a family man, Brazil, you've just elected your president. He will be in the first round.
Brazil's former president Dilma Rousseff strongly condemns the attack, but says he was the one who has been stirring up hatred. In 2016, when Rousseff was being impeached by Congress, Bolsonaro praised the officer who had tortured her during the military dictatorship.
I think it's awful, but I think that encouraging hate creates that kind of attitude. You cannot say that you're going to kill anyone, especially if you are a presidential candidate.
Meanwhile, former President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva's electoral campaign is over because a Supreme Court judge rejected the final appeal by lawyers for this jailed former president. That means the front-runner in all the polls is now almost certainly out of the race. His running mate Fernando Haddad will replace him as the Workers' Party candidate. Dilma Rousseff visited her predecessor, Lula da Silva, in prison. She said the court's decision to bar him as a candidate is absurd.
I do not cry in front of the enemy. I didn't cry during my time in jail. I didn't cry during my torture. I do not cry. Now, when it comes to President Lula and this absurdity, I think it's more than injustice. There is no greater injustice than condemning an innocent person, and for him, I cry. I remember him and I cry.
It's Independence Day in Brazil. Marginalized communities are coming together in Sao Paulo. Ignacio Limas has more.
I'm standing in Paulista Avenue, where a protest named The Cry of the Forgotten has started. This protest is held by historically marginalised communities who have long denounced that the country's independence did not take into account their people. Part of this event is also a demonstration asking for the release of Lula da Silva, despite the fact that it was just yesterday when the Supreme Court quashed any hopes of Lula's defence team and of his followers by deciding that the former president could not run for office. Demonstrations like this are taking place all over Brazil, asking for democracy and non-violent solutions to the ongoing crisis. In particular, talking about the stance of far-right presidential candidate Jair Bolsonaro, who was recently stabbed during a rally. They say that while unfortunate, the candidate has frequently advocated for violent solutions to the country's issues, and this march stands against violence in all its forms.
And citizens in Rio de Janeiro are coming together to begin the reconstruction of Brazil's National Museum. The museum burned down Sunday night, destroying 200 years of priceless artifacts.
The building that housed Brazil's National Museum survived the fire that destroyed 90% of the artifacts inside. Nearly 20 million pieces spanning millions of years of existence were lost. The academic community has promised to continue reconstruction efforts.
Porque no solamente es historia de Brasil lo que se ha perdido.
We didn't just lose Brazilian history. We lost artifacts representing millions of years of human history, like fossils, indigenous artifacts, and ancient insects.
De fósiles, de lenguas indígenas.
One of the biggest losses was the oldest human fossil in the American continent, Egyptian mummies, along with countless archaeological and geological collections that told the history of the continent's original people.
This was an attack on our memory, on our history, on the original languages of Latin America. It's very serious, one of the worst attacks on the history of the indigenous people.
The National Museum is part of the University of Rio de Janeiro, which has faced large budget cuts since 2015. They've only become worse since President Michel Temer came to office. He cut the museum's budget by nearly $20 million.
It's not just the museum. The whole country is being affected by this perverse logic of budget cutbacks. We have started to mobilize, trying to show our reality, to inform people to fight these policies. To destroy Rio's university is to destroy the nation itself. It's destroying our future.
One of Michel Temer's first measures was a constitutional amendment that froze public investments for 20 years, greatly affecting culture and education.
I think there has to be political compromise so we as a nation can revoke these measures, because education, health, culture and even science are being eradicated.
The Brazilian people will not hold anything back in their efforts to see the museum be rebuilt. They also say they will take to the streets to demand that the constitutional amendment that froze public spending for 20 years be repealed.
Political parties in Bolivia are grappling with news of a new electoral law that introduces primary elections to the country beginning in January.
Opposition parties are shocked by a new law that for the first time in Bolivian history will establish primary elections. There will be elections to elect presidential and vice presidential candidates for each political party ahead of the national election. The Electoral Court has been working on the law for nearly 2 years.
These primaries will take place in January, and only those registered to a political party will vote. The Bolivian people will not take part in these, and over 40 million Bolivianos will be spent. This is a huge disaster for democracy.
I strongly reject this new law. This is government manipulation that seeks to destroy our political parties.
The new law states that political parties must register a minimum number of members. They must also define any outside political alliances before January's primaries.
Anyone who wants to be a candidate for president is bound to comply with this new law, which is highly favorable to democracy. They will have the benefit of being recognized for months before the presidential elections. They will be able to present the proposals for nearly a year.
The new political organizations law also reworks government financing for political parties. It expands guarantees for women to become candidates and sanctions those who switch between political parties for personal gain. Primary elections will be held in January and presidential elections are set to be held in October 2019.
We'll take a short break now. More news in a few.
We are African. Culture and tradition is what we are born with.
We might be apart in terms of distance, but we are always together. We need to love ourselves.
Back to Africa.
Sunday, only on Telesur.
Welcome back. Trinidad and Tobago's unions have gone ahead with a one-day national strike, but it's not clear as yet how many workers heeded their call. Union leaders met with the Prime Minister on Thursday to discuss halting the closure of the state oil refinery. The government said the unions came with no new proposals, so they've agreed to disagree. Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley has asked public servants to let good sense prevail.
Tomorrow, if it was not on, is on more than ever now.
Yes.
Tomorrow is on. Tomorrow is a day to rest and reflect. Rest and reflect. And may I say at this point that long before the Petrochin issue became an issue and an announcement, tomorrow's activity was declared.
No, the government is not overly concerned. That is a call that the union leaders have made. Their members will decide what they want to do. If they want to adhere to the call, we are ready, and that is the position of the government.
Trinidad Education Minister says while some teachers did join the strike, the majority of teachers turned out to work today. In these 7 education districts, 50% of primary school teachers and 52.5% of secondary school teachers showed up for work. The ministry had threatened teachers with legal action if they'd stayed away. Teachers are considered an essential service and are not legally allowed to take industrial action. The minister says there is a direct correlation between teacher attendance and student academic performance.
But when we look at the two schools where we had our children performing 1, 2, and 3, we find in the case of the Gandhi Memorial Village School, there are 20 teachers and staff. 19 of those teachers turned out. They had the first place students.
Teachers in Guyana are heading back to the classroom after a 4-day strike. There was no agreement reached after a 2-hour meeting at the Department of Labor. Now the dispute between the Guyana Teachers Union and the government will go to arbitration. Whatever agreement is reached in arbitration will be binding on both sides. Every day, Argentina's currency crisis is pushing more and more small and medium-sized businesses to the brink. Thousands have been forced to shut down and over 500,000 more are at risk.
The economic turmoil has left these businesses reeling. Many are shutting down each week. In fact, about 8,000 companies have been forced to close. And Macro's economic scheme isn't helping.
I have a lot of concern. The situation is very critical. Many factories have shut down. Others are going down the same path. There is a lot of concern about this government that took office in December 2015. Macri seems to have reversed any bit of progress made. That's why the economy can neither improve nor move forward.
It's a domino effect. Small and medium-sized enterprises provide employment, yet they are facing a challenge for survival. There is a lack of incentives from the state, high financing rates, and no profitability. This equals high levels of debt and payments that cannot be met.
Contraction of the demand, opening to more imports, and the high interest rates generate a serious situation, leading to the bankruptcy of SMEs, while others are obligated to let people go.
The strengthening of the dollar, the tariffs, and renegotiation with the IMF has put critical industries at risk. Over the last 2 years, there have been 85,000 layoffs.
SMEs are becoming today a problem in the terms of employment and production. It seems like the official politics are looking to purposely harm the productive system.
Inflation and the devaluation of the peso has put more than 800,000 small and medium enterprises at risk.
The Colombian government has asked the National Liberation Army to clarify whether it has a presence in Venezuelan territory. The authorities say it's important they disclose the information as a condition to resuming dialogue. They're also considering a new ceasefire agreement if they provide that information.
It's very difficult to verify any possibility of a ceasefire if the ELN does not clarify the truth about its presence in another country.
Political and social organizations in El Salvador are reacting to the report of the sexual abuse of 3 young detained migrants. They had been separated from their families and held on the southern border of the United States.
Deputy Minister for Salvadorans Abroad, Liduvna Margarin, held a meeting with members of the Gender Commission of the Legislative Assembly. She revealed details about the sexual abuse girls from 12 to 17 years old suffered in Arizona detention centers.
The sexual abuser has already been arrested and he is now before the U.S. courts. He is a shelter social worker.
President Salvador Sanchez Cerén attended the launch of the National Strategy for the Integral Development of Minors, a proposal to defend minor rights in Salvador. Sanchez Cerén expressed his concern about the migratory situation and the separated minors.
We have to look after the rights of our citizens who migrate, especially to the children and teenagers. That's why we are developing an intense plan to defend the people affected by the zero-tolerance policy by the U.S.
With the possibility of repatriation of the abused girls, the appropriate institutions are ready to provide psychological care.
Workers of National Council for Children and Adolescents welcome the children, evaluate them psychologically and emotionally, and determine whether the child is ready to go back to his or her family.
Authorities say one of the abused girls is already together with her family in the U.S. Now, they will also verify the conditions of all minors who are still in detention centers.
Time for the second break in this newscast. More news after this.
An occasion to enjoy the cultural diversity that defines our South American essence. Come along and find out the story behind these personalities, traditions, and artistic expressions that unite us as a whole. Real Lives. Saturdays, only on Telesur.
Welcome back. In Spain, the judge who opened an investigation into recordings about the former king, Juan Carlos, has now closed the case. The Spanish royal family faced embarrassment over a recording in which the former king's ex-mistress accused him of money laundering and tax evasion. She also alleged that he used her name to buy property in Monaco and Morocco and tried to hide the money. The recordings were released by Spanish media. And the death toll in Japan's earthquake has risen. Here's more on that and a look at some other stories from around the world.
16 people have been confirmed dead and nearly 30 are still missing following a powerful earthquake in Japan's Hokkaido island. The 6.7 magnitude quake hit the island in the early hours of Thursday. Electricity is slowly returning. Ground transportation has returned as well. The airport is expected to reopen on Saturday. Protests have entered their fifth day in Yemen against the rising cost of living after the fall of the currency. Roads were blocked in parts of Aden as demonstrators made their way through the city denouncing the corrupt government. The value of the Yemeni rial has dropped to half its value in relation to the US dollar, causing food and fuel to rise by nearly 3 times in price.
Stand by our brothers and sisters in the south to bring down this corrupt government, the government of cheating and deceiving. We are with the Southern Revolution, standing with its sons and on the same line, and the transitional council is representing us. The government of corruption shall fall.
The trial of 12 men accused of kidnapping and raping an underage girl has begun in Morocco. According to 17-year-old Khadija, she was kidnapped in June by the group who held her captive, raped her, forced her to take drugs, and tattooed obscene images on her arms. She was returned to her family last month after her father reached a deal with her captors. The defendants have admitted to have sex with her, but claimed it was consensual. However, as the girl was 17 at the time, it's still considered a crime as she was under 18.
The LGBTQ community in India see the repeal of a law outlawing gay sex as a breath of fresh air. Rohit, who is now known as Suzanne, is a professional makeup artist who experienced social alienation during her transition. She hopes decriminalization of homosexuality will pave the way for acceptance.
Day by day, when it was in April 2014, transgender was recognized as third gender. I was little happy, but not much happy, because there has to be, accepted between LGBT community, not transgenders only, like gay, lesbians, bisexuals. They should be also accepted. And at the time, I feel happy. But today, you know, about the verdict, after the verdict was legalized, I feel much happy. I don't know how to express my feelings.
The Thai football team, who saved from a flooded cave, has paid tribute to their rescuers in a showcase in Bangkok. The exhibition recounts the international effort to save the 12 boys and their 25-year-old coach. It also features a statue in honor of the Thai diver who died during the rescue. And we've come to the end of this news brief. For these and many other stories, you can find them on our website at telesur.tv.net/English. And join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Telesur English, I'm Sony Gray. Thank you for watching.